Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Mandy froze in place, unable to tear her gaze from the impeccably dressed man standing before her. His grave tone pierced the air like a dagger. "Amanda Black, you've been served," he declared, a flicker of regret softening his otherwise formal demeanor. The office seemed to hold its breath, an eerie hush descending over the space. In her trembling hands lay a document that shattered her world, a legal summons signaling the demise of her 5-year marriage. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into her chair, stifling a sob as the weight of the moment crushed her. Gradually, the muted hum of office life resumed. Colleagues exchanged hushed whispers, sneaking glances in Mandy's direction. Some eyes brimmed with pity, others held a tinge of smug satisfaction. Mandy, lost in her own whirlwind of shock, barely noticed until a soothing voice cut through her haze. "Mandy, come on," Kit urged softly, her hand extended to help her. "Let's get you somewhere private." Kit's concerned face, framed by dark hair, offered a small measure of comfort as she guided Mandy out of the room. Behind them, the buzz of speculation grew louder. Once the vibrant, flirtatious soul of the office, Mandy now seemed a hollow shadow of her former self. Some coworkers snickered at the irony, while others simply shook their heads, resigned to their assumptions about her marital troubles. "How could this happen?" Mandy croaked, her voice quivering under the weight of disbelief. She hugged herself tightly, as though trying to keep from unraveling completely. Kit wrapped an arm around her shoulders, her presence steady and grounding. "I don't know," Kit admitted gently. "Did Eric ever say anything? Did he give you any warning this was coming?" "No," Mandy replied, her words thick with pain. "If anything, it felt like we were in the best place we'd been in years. He was acting like the man I fell in love with. I thought he was making up for lost time." Kit's face twitched at the mention, her unease subtle but unmistakable. Mandy noticed, her thoughts beginning to spiral. The past few months flashed through Mandy's mind, each memory sharper and more painful than the last. When Eric returned from Afghanistan, their marriage had been rekindled with an intensity she hadn't felt in years. Their passion was electrifying, their nights filled with a renewed closeness that bordered on euphoric. The memory made her blush, though the sweetness of it now felt tainted. "I mean, he couldn't keep his hands off me," Mandy muttered, a bittersweet smile tugging at her lips despite the tears pooling in her eyes. "After I got back from that business trip last week, it was like we were kids again. I thought we were good." Her voice trailed off as she caught Kit's wary expression. "I swear, Kit," Mandy said firmly, her tone defensive. "Nothing happened on that trip. You know I told you. It was over. I wasn't lying." Kit nodded, though her concern lingered, unspoken but heavy in the air. "Mandy," Kit said after a pause, her voice careful, "when was the last time Eric held you without an agenda, when he kissed you, really kissed you? When was the last time he made love to you, not just intimacy?" The question struck Mandy like a physical blow. She gasped, her hands flying to her face as fresh tears spilled over. "Why?" she whispered, her voice shattering under the weight of her grief. "Why would he do this to me?" Then, as if a puzzle piece suddenly clicked into place, Mandy stiffened. A terrible realization dawned in her eyes, draining the color from her face. "No!" she choked out, her voice trembling. He doesn't know, does he?" Her hands trembled as panic took hold. "Oh God, Kit, he knows!" Kit pulled Mandy into a firm embrace, her own tears threatening to fall as the gravity of Mandy's epiphany settled over them. If Eric truly had uncovered the truth, there would be no going back. Meanwhile, miles away, Eric leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He held his phone to his ear, listening as the confirmation came through. The photos, the legal documents, it had all been delivered. "Thank you," he said calmly, ending the call and turning back to his laptop. A single keystroke set another piece of his plan into motion, each step meticulously calculated to leave a permanent scar on Mandy's life. "This is only the beginning," Eric thought, his lips curling into a faint smile as he dialed another number. "Hello," he said, his tone steady and resolved, as his orchestrated retribution unfolded exactly as he had intended. A chipper voice answered the call. "Human Resources, how may I help you today?" "I need to speak with Mr. Davis," Eric said coldly. "This is Eric Black." "Certainly, Mr. Black," the woman replied quickly. "I'll connect you right away." Moments later, Eric was speaking with the stern, no-nonsense John Davis. Though the conversation was brief, the tension between them was unmistakable. Neither man raised his voice, but their words carried an icy hostility. As the call ended, Eric took a deep breath, attempting to steady himself. He glanced at his phone screen and noticed 5 missed calls from his wife. Not now, he thought, pushing the distraction aside. Not yet. A sharp knock at the conference room door jolted him from his thoughts. When Kit opened the door, she immediately recognized the figures standing outside. Leading the group was Simon Samuels, the vice president and head of the branch, his posture radiating authority. Beside him stood John Davis, his face a furious shade of red, his anger almost tangible. Bringing up the rear was Anna Prescott, the office manager and Kit's immediate supervisor. "Miss Garnett," Samuels began with a solemn tone, "we need to speak with Mrs. Black. Thank you for your help. Please return to your desk." Kit nodded and slipped out, carefully closing the door behind her. Once the room was private, Samuels wasted no time. "Mrs. Black, we have a serious issue." Meanwhile, Mandy hurried out of the building, clutching a thick envelope tightly in her hands. Its damning contents, photographs of her and Sean Thompson, a manager from the 3rd floor in compromising positions, felt like a lead weight. Davis had given her the envelope, explaining the gravity of the situation in blunt terms. He also relayed his earlier conversation with Eric, who had threatened to reveal the company's failure to uphold its code of conduct. Eric, Davis had warned, was planning to consult Mandy, his estranged wife, before deciding whether to take legal action. Davis had instructed her to go home and speak with Eric immediately, cautioning her that the situation could escalate quickly. He also informed her of a meeting scheduled for the next day to determine her future with the company. Tears blurred Mandy's vision as she made her way to the parking lot. The sunlight reflected harshly off the cars, making it hard to find her vehicle. But there it was, her black Hyundai Santa Fe, a distinctive SUV among the rows of vehicles. She climbed into the driver's seat and froze for a moment, overwhelmed by memories of the arguments that had finally persuaded Eric to rent the car for her before his deployment to Afghanistan. Wiping her tears, she put on her sunglasses and drove away. From a nearby car, a man sitting in an old Chevy sedan discreetly pressed a button on his phone. "Thanks, Bob," Eric said calmly on the other end of the line. "No, that'll be all. Let Ron know you guys did excellent work. You've earned the recognition. Thanks again. Goodbye." He shut his laptop with a weary sigh. One more call, he thought. Just one more, and this would all be set in motion. But why hesitate? What reason did he have to look back? His wife had betrayed him, his trust was destroyed, and their marriage was in shambles. Shaking his head, Eric picked up his phone and dialed a number. The phone rang once, twice, and then a 3rd time before a soft click indicated the call had connected. Silence filled the line. Eric stared at the video feed on his laptop, his face unreadable. After a few long moments, a solitary tear rolled down his cheek. Meanwhile, Mandy navigated her SUV onto the highway, groaning as traffic slowed to a near standstill. She smacked the steering wheel in frustration. What should have been a quick 30-minute drive was shaping up to take over an hour. Her thoughts spiraled as she considered the ruins of her marriage. Was there any way to repair it? Deep down, she knew the answer. Eric had uncovered her affair, and while the man she'd known before his deployment might have forgiven her, the one who had returned was not the same. Forgiveness seemed impossible now. The photos, those damning photos, were undeniable evidence of her betrayal, discovered by Eric while he was stationed halfway across the globe. Mandy sobbed, the weight of Eric's emotions pressing heavily on her chest. She felt crushed by the pain she had caused him, but resolved to fight for their marriage, no matter the odds. Her love for him was unwavering, Even if her actions had betrayed that love, the self-reproach was relentless. "Way to show you care, Mandy," she scorned herself. "You cheated on him, twice, while he was serving overseas." She clenched her fists, attempting to suppress the overwhelming guilt, but the tears wouldn't relent. Trust had never come easily to Eric. His upbringing had seen to that. His childhood had been marred by abandonment. His father walked out, leaving his mother to battle her demons through the haze of alcohol. Over 5 years of marriage, Mandy had only met Eric's mother twice, once on their wedding day and again when their son was born. Winning Eric's trust had been a slow, arduous process. When they first crossed paths in college, she'd known he was a soldier and believed she understood the gravity of his life. By that time, he had already completed 2 years of service and was pursuing an engineering degree. They dated for a year before Eric proposed. Her father's reaction to the engagement was still etched in her mind. "This isn't about Eric," he had said, his voice calm but resolute. "I think he'll make a fine husband. But you? I'm not sure you're cut out for life as a military wife." Mandy's father, Mike Lomax, had served 4 years in the Navy when she was a child. She recalled the tension-filled arguments between her parents during that time and her father's determination to spare her a similar fate. "You were right, Dad," she muttered bitterly, shaking her head at the memory. "So right. I've been a terrible soldier's wife." At first, things seemed to be falling into place. Eric found a steady engineering job, and they bought a charming starter home. Their future felt bright. Then the orders from Uncle Sam came. When Eric received his deployment notice, Mandy's frustration boiled over, and she lashed out, accusing him of abandoning her. To compound her distress, she was already 4 months pregnant when he left for Iraq. As she navigated through dense traffic, she brushed away fresh tears, haunted by the loneliness that had engulfed her during those months apart. Her parents had tried to support her, stepping in as much as they could. But the nights were long, sleepless, and agonizingly empty. She yearned for Eric's strong arms and reassuring words, but he was half a world away. While she knew her anguish was selfish, Eric was fulfilling his duty. It didn't make the solitude any easier to endure. Her mother moved in for the last month of her pregnancy, easing the burden somewhat, but it was only a temporary reprieve. Lisa, her mother, had always been her confidant. Their bond often felt more like friendship than a traditional mother-daughter relationship. Still, there were boundaries Lisa wouldn't cross. Every time Mandy sought insights into her parents' marriage during Mike's Navy years, her mother would grow tense and quickly change the subject. Eric came home the day after their son, Randy, was born. For a brief moment, Mandy allowed herself to believe they had become a real family. But it wasn't to last. Just 10 days later, Eric was gone again. Her mother, ever observant, had noticed troubling signs in Mandy's behavior and urged her to stay strong, warning her about the potential consequences of even one mistake. Though Lisa didn't share details, Mandy suspected her parents had endured similar challenges. Their relationship, while cordial and functional, lacked passion. It seemed more like a partnership of convenience than a marriage. As time went on, Mandy found herself spiraling into a deep depression. Returning to work initially provided a much-needed escape. Then she began collaborating on a project with Sean Thompson. Sean was everything Eric wasn't. While Eric exuded a rugged, grounded presence, Sean had the polished allure of a Hollywood star. His smooth confidence, rich baritone voice, and captivating smile stirred feelings in Mandy she hadn't expected. She found herself drawn to him, her heart racing whenever he was near. Sean, however, was married to an elegant New York socialite, and his family had relocated to the area just a few years prior. Despite her growing awareness of how far she had strayed, Mandy couldn't stop the emotional freefall. She replayed her choices over and over, unable to ignore the pain and destruction she had invited into her life. She had encountered Sean's wife only once at a social event. The woman exuded a striking, almost synthetic elegance, with a persona that seemed as if it were plucked straight from the cast of a melodramatic reality show. Strangely, this only intensified Sean's appeal for Mandy. Within weeks of starting their professional collaboration, she found herself giving in to the lure of his attention. No, that wasn't quite right, Mandy admitted to herself. She hadn't merely yielded, she had initiated it. The escalation began during a brief 2-day business trip, where the harmless flirtation she had started evolved into a full-fledged affair. For a while, they continued to meet in secret, but Mandy cut things off abruptly just before her husband, Eric, returned home. When Eric came back, he wasn't the same man she had kissed goodbye. His light-hearted demeanor was gone, replaced by a haunted, withdrawn version of himself. She understood why. His deployment had been harrowing. Mandy still remembered the phone call after the tragedy that had shaken him. A vehicle in front of Eric's convoy had struck an IED, killing 3 of his friends and severely injuring another. Eric had been shattered by the loss. That day, Mandy had listened as he cried over the phone, her heart breaking for him while a heavy guilt sat like a stone in her chest. She had whispered words of love and encouragement, but her shame made her voice tremble. Just 5 days earlier, she had been in Sean's arms. In the weeks following Eric's return, she devoted herself entirely to him, holding him as if her touch alone could mend the wounds he carried. Her love for him was real and profound, and she convinced herself that her affair with Sean had been nothing more than a fleeting lapse in judgment. Slowly, life began to feel stable again, until the news of Eric's next deployment shattered her fragile sense of normalcy. When orders for Afghanistan came, Mandy was devastated. 2 months after Eric's departure, the loneliness became unbearable. Fear and isolation overshadowed the guilt she had tried so hard to bury, and she reached out to Sean once more. But this time, Sean's attention had shifted. He had begun flirting with a lively woman from marketing, and Mandy found herself working hard to recapture his interest. As she did, her shame only deepened, yet she couldn't stop herself. Her inner voice was merciless. You hate yourself for this, don't you? But you still went through with it. Tears often accompanied these scoldings, spilling over as the weight of her choices crushed her. Sean began visiting her regularly, even spending nights at her house. They took on another project together, strengthening their bond further. For a fleeting moment, Mandy even entertained the idea of leaving Eric for Sean. That illusion was quickly shattered. Mandy, her son Randy, and her parents traveled to Fort Bragg to see Eric during his R&R. The trip was fraught with tension. She felt certain her parents suspected something, though they never said so outright. All her apprehensions disappeared the moment she saw Eric. As he wrapped her in his arms and kissed her, she remembered exactly why she had fallen in love with him. Their time together was transformative. They worked hard to rekindle their love, focusing on their family and rediscovering the connection they once had. Eric's tenderness, passion, and devotion brought Mandy to tears, and she swore to herself that she would never betray him again. When Eric shared his plans to leave the army after this deployment and finally settle into civilian life, Mandy cried tears of joy and relief. Their family could finally be whole again. Upon returning home, Mandy severed ties with Sean for good. His anger was palpable, but she stood firm. She threw herself into preparing for Eric's return, determined to give him the life and love he deserved. Seeking professional help, Mandy was diagnosed with clinical depression. With therapy and medication, she began to heal, gradually finding strength and clarity. Each day, she resolved to be a better version of herself, a wife worthy of Eric's love and trust. When Eric returned home for good, Mandy kept her promise. She gave him her love, her attention, and her unwavering loyalty. Yet something between them had changed. Eric was quieter, his emotions locked away behind an impenetrable wall. Mandy attributed it to the trauma he had endured in Afghanistan, the weight of the horrors he had seen. But as she watched him now, staring out the rain-streaked window with an unreadable expression, a dreadful realization crept over her. Eric knew. He had somehow uncovered her betrayal. The thought filled her with terror, threatening to unravel everything they had rebuilt. The silence between them was oppressive, heavy with truths neither of them dared to voice. Eric remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the dreary gray sky, while Mandy felt the fragile threads of their rebuilt life begin to fray. The brief storm would pass soon. The clouds would dissipate, and sunlight would reclaim the sky. But not just yet. Not yet, Eric thought, staring intently at the blinking dot on his laptop screen. The tracker had been motionless for a while, stuck in a traffic jam. Now, at last, it showed movement. Mandy's SUV was on the move again. Eric let out a heavy breath, glancing down at his watch. It was time. Time to make the call that might very well be his last, to the woman he'd fiercely loved for 6 long years. Mandy's chest tightened as her phone vibrated on the dashboard. Her grip on the steering wheel became ironclad. Seeing Eric's name flash on the screen, she whispered a quick prayer, steadied her shaky breath, and pressed the answer button. "Eric?" "Yes," he replied, his tone deliberate and restrained. Her voice wavered as she struggled to hold back tears. "Please, let me explain. Let me tell you how sorry I am, Eric. Please, Mandy." His voice was steady, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. "Eric, are you there?" she asked, desperation creeping into her words. "I'm here," he said bluntly. "For now." "Where are you? Are you at home? Is Randy with you?" she asked hesitantly. "I don't have a home anymore, Mandy," he said, his voice faltering for just a moment under the weight of his own words. "You made sure of that." "Please," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "Where are you? Are you waiting for me?" "Waiting for you?" he repeated with a cold laugh. "The way you've been waiting for me? Sure, Mandy." Her tears came freely now, her sobs reverberating through the line. His words hit her like punches, each syllable laced with pain and a fury she had never heard from him before. She despised herself for turning him into this. "Eric, just let me explain," she pleaded. "I've made mistakes, horrible mistakes. I've hurt you so deeply, but I love you. Only you. Please let me say my piece." There was a silence on the other end, heavy and unrelenting. "Go ahead," he said at last, his voice void of emotion. "Say whatever you think you need to. Just don't expect it to change a damn thing. You cheated on me, Mandy, not once, not twice, repeatedly. What could you possibly say now to make that right?" "Eric, please," she choked out between sobs. "For us, for our family, don't give up. Don't leave. Please, baby, don't leave me." "Don't leave," he repeated, his voice filled with bitter disbelief. "Like you left me? Like you left us?" "No," she shouted, her voice cracking under the strain. "I know what I did is unforgivable. I was scared, lonely. It doesn't excuse anything, I know that. But I never stopped loving you, never stopped believing in us. I want to fix this. Please, let me try." He scoffed, the disbelief in his voice unmistakable. "Fix this? You think you didn't abandon us? How do you explain screaming his name, Mandy, over and over? Do you think that doesn't count as leaving?" Tears blurred her vision as she tried to focus on the congested road, desperate to get to him. She had to see him, to make him understand how deeply she regretted everything. Maybe, if he looked into her eyes, he would see her sincerity and find some sliver of hope to hold on to. Eric's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and bitter. "I finally have proof. Proof that my wife was unfaithful while I was deployed in Afghanistan. Do you know how lucky we are, Mandy? If I'd known back then what I know now, I might have killed you. You and that bastard." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then his voice returned, softer but weighed down by finality. "Amanda, this is the last time. If this call ends, if it drops or if one of us gets cut off, it's over. There will be no more chances." "Eric, please," Mandy sobbed, her voice trembling as panic took over. "We can still work through this," Eric began, his tone steady but laced with a false warmth that felt more like a taunt than reassurance. "We can see a therapist together, try to mend what's broken. But before you head back to your life, there are some things you should know." He didn't pause for her to respond. "First off, I emptied all of our accounts and maxed out every credit card we have. For 3 years you've been sneaking around behind my back. So I figured it was only fair to level the playing field," he said, his voice icy. Her sharp intake of breath didn't deter him. "As for the house, it's yours. Honestly, I'd rather not step foot in that bedroom again, feels tainted. Oh, and don't worry about my stuff. I took what I needed. It all fit in one suitcase. The rest, consider it your problem." He gave a laugh, hollow and bitter. The SUV's yours too. Good luck keeping up with the payments, especially since I hear you're losing your job tomorrow. Just a little heads up. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Oh, and about those photos, the ones you wouldn't want anyone else to see? I shared them, sent them to your colleagues, your family, our friends, and even the church group. Let's just say you're about to become quite the topic of conversation. You're welcome. Mandy's face contorted in anguish. Eric, no, please, let's just talk this out, she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. Eric's expression remained calm, almost indifferent. Talk? Really? I gave you 4 months, Mandy. 4 months to come clean after I got back, not a word. And now the only reason you're saying anything is because you've been caught. Am I wrong? His piercing stare seemed to pin her in place. She couldn't deny it. The truth hung heavy between them. And about your little fling. His lips curled into a smirk. Sean, isn't it? I thought about confronting him, even paid his wife a visit. Turns out I didn't need to do much. She's got her own plans. Her family? Let's just say they're not people you'd want to cross. If I were you, I'd warn Sean. He's on borrowed time. Oh, and about those side pieces of his? She's dealing with them too. Funny, isn't it? That includes you. Eric, please, Mandy whispered, tears streaming down her face. Give me a chance to make this right. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced nervously at the screen. It's Mrs. Johnson next door, she murmured, her voice unsteady. Eric's tone sharpened. I warned you, Mandy. If you hang up on me, you'll regret it. No, I wasn't going to hang up, she stammered, fear evident in her voice. I thought it might be about Randy. Randy's fine, Eric said softly, though the sudden change in his tone only deepened her dread. He's with me right now, fast asleep. Don't worry, he's safe. Mandy exhaled shakily, relief momentarily overtaking her panic. But speaking of Sean's wife, Victoria, Eric continued, his voice taking on a sinister edge, while you and Sean were on your little business trip last week. He was interrupted by another notification. Mandy glanced at her phone. Mrs. Watson this time, she muttered under her breath. Eric let out a dark laugh. You can let her know Randy's fine. He's right here with me. The malice in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Anyway, back to Victoria, Eric pressed, the amusement in his tone growing. She's quite something, isn't she? While you and Sean were off playing house, I spent a couple of days getting to know her better. And let's just say she was very forthcoming. Mandy's hands trembled on the wheel as his words cut deeper. Tears began to blur her vision, but Eric continued, relentless. Not that she's much better than you in bed, he added with a cruel chuckle. Honestly, she's worse, always whining about what she wants, how she wants it. There's no room for fun with someone like that. I'm sure Sean would agree. He laughed again, the sound sharp and unforgiving. So congratulations, Mandy. You've officially hit rock bottom. Stop it! Mandy screamed, her voice cracking as sobs racked her body. Just stop! She slammed her fists against the steering wheel in frustration, cursing the slow-moving traffic that trapped her in this nightmare. After a long pause, she wiped at her tears, trying to steady her voice. Fine, Eric, she spat bitterly. You win. Are you happy now? You got your revenge? You obliterated me. She sat motionless, wrapped in silence, yearning for his reply, but only emptiness answered her. I still love you, Eric, she murmured, her voice trembling and faint. I know I can't excuse what I did, but I'm begging for a chance to set things right. Please, let me explain. There are medical issues you need to understand. If you ever cared for me, even a little, meet me, just once. Medical issues? He retorted with a bitter edge. What is it this time? Postpartum depression, clinical depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD? Does any of it even matter, Mandy? None of it stopped you. You still went ahead and cheated. His tone sharpened, his words laced with scorn. How do I know? That's irrelevant now. No, it does matter, she cried out, her voice breaking under the weight of her desperation. Eric didn't flinch. When I started suspecting, I brought in professionals. They tapped your phone, installed cameras, even put one in our bedroom. Her breath hitched, her voice quivering with shock. Oh my God, Eric, how could you? You went to such lengths. Is your hatred for me so complete? What about the love we once shared? There was love, he said, his voice dipping low, until I watched the footage, you and him, in our bed. His tone trembled, anger mingling with raw anguish. Do you remember when Randy walked in on you? Do you, Mandy? Her face paled at the mention. No, please don't. He cut her off sharply, his emotions barely restrained. Imagine how I felt, sitting there, watching my 2-year-old son call another man daddy. That night I watched you tuck Randy into bed, with him. Whatever love I had for you died in that moment. Her sobs broke the fragile silence between them. Eric's tone turned colder, harsher. I guess it's a twisted kind of luck that I didn't find out until we were stationed at Fort Bragg. When I saw the footage, God, I nearly lost it. And you know what happens when someone loses control in a place like that? It's fatal. He turned back to his laptop, his eyes narrowing as the GPS tracker inched closer to its target. A cruel smile twisted his lips. You think I've already hurt you? Amanda, this is only the beginning. A sharp gasp escaped her on the other end. What are you talking about? What are you planning? Surprises, he replied, his voice frigid and detached. Minutes later, Mandy's SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. Her breath caught as she stared, horrified, at the inferno consuming their home. Oh my God, she choked out, trembling. Eric, what have you done? A rhetorical question, don't you think? He replied, amusement lacing his words. I was trained to build things under combat conditions. Naturally, I know how to dismantle them just as effectively. Where's Randy? She screamed, panic swallowing her whole. Eric, where's our son? Our son, Eric mocked, is right here with me, fast asleep in his car seat, safe for now. But tell me, Mandy, did you see the message I left on the front lawn? Her voice faltered, dread clawing at her. What message? Eric chuckled darkly. It's probably hard to make out from the ground, but the news helicopters should have a perfect view. I thought cheating whore burned into the grass was an appropriate touch. Her cries intensified, uncontrollable and filled with despair. Eric's voice remained steady, merciless. Don't expect pity from the neighbors either. I made sure they all know. Paid a few kids to distribute some pictures around the block. Call it a public service. He let the sound of her sobs fill the silence before hanging up, his heart calcified as the chaos he left behind consumed everything. Mandy, you might want to start planning, Eric said, his voice sharp and unforgiving. Where you're going to sleep tonight, and for the foreseeable future. Maybe that SUV of yours? At least until the repo guys come for it. I wouldn't count on Sean either. By now I bet Victoria's tearing him apart. His lips curled into a smirk. That just leaves your parents, doesn't it? Imagine how thrilled your dad will be to have not one but 2 women like you under his roof. Mandy swallowed hard, her voice trembling. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Mandy, Eric snapped. You're not that naive. You told me yourself. Your dad cheated on your mom while he was in the Navy. And surprise, your mom wasn't exactly faithful to him either. Mom? Mandy's voice cracked, barely audible as if saying the word might break her. Eric's laugh was cutting. Oh yeah, your dad let that slip after I got back from Iraq. It's funny, isn't it? Makes me wonder if he had an inkling his daughter would follow in her mother's footsteps and cheat on her husband. He stared at the phone, his tone icy. But here's the difference, Mandy. I'm not your father. I don't have the stomach to stay with a cheater. Maybe your dad stuck around out of love or for your sake, who knows? But me? I'm choosing a different path. I need a wife I can trust, someone loyal, someone who can be a real mother to Randy. Eric, please, Mandy sobbed, her words pouring out in desperation. I can be that wife. I already am a good mom to Randy. I'm his only mom. Eric's voice turned colder, detached. That's not up to you or me. The court will decide. Though, to be honest, he paused deliberately. My little stunt with burning down our house and draining our accounts probably won't win me any points with a judge. Mandy's breath hitched, her mind racing to process what he'd just said. While she struggled for words, Eric's attention shifted to a young man stepping out of a cab nearby. The man, wearing a baseball cap and a casual t-shirt, glanced in Eric's direction. Eric signaled him with 2 quick flashes of his headlights. "Listen up, Mandy," Eric said, glancing at his watch. "There's a lot you don't know, and we're short on time. First, don't get too cozy at work. I won't press charges, but Victoria, she's coming after you with everything she's got. And thanks to all the evidence I gave her, her case looks pretty solid." He coughed lightly before continuing. "As for me, I'm not sticking around to see how it all plays out. I've taken a job overseas. Randy and I need a clean slate. It'll be better for both of us." "No!" Mandy screamed into the phone, panic overtaking her. "You can't take my baby, Eric. Please don't do this." Eric's reply was like a blade. "Actually, Mandy, I can. He's my son." "He's mine too," she cried, her voice breaking under the weight of her despair. Eric let out a slow, measured breath. "In a few years, Amanda, he won't even remember you. But don't worry. I'll send you pictures at Christmas. Maybe even call on Mother's Day or his birthday. Of course, since I won't know where you'll be, I'll just send those to your parents." Mandy's sobs grew louder, more frantic, as if she could will him to reconsider. Eric sat quietly for a moment, the sound of her anguish cutting through him in a way he hadn't anticipated. For the first time, he felt a twinge of doubt, a question about just how far he'd gone. He wouldn't send pictures. He wouldn't call. Deep down, he knew that. The thought of her waiting for a call that would never come struck him as crueler than anything else he'd done. "Goodbye, Mandy," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Rot in hell." Her cries escalated, raw and hysterical as he ended the call. A single tear slid down his cheek, and he wiped it away, startled by its presence. "Captain Black?" the young man by the curb called out. "Not anymore," Eric replied with a faint, weary smile. "Just Eric Black. For now." The man approached, handing over a thick envelope. Inside were the account numbers and passwords for the offshore funds Eric had transferred, minus the hefty fees. Alongside them were forged passports, IDs, and plane tickets for Marcus Gray and his son, Michael Gray. "You're all set," the man said, grinning. Eric nodded, his future neatly contained in that single envelope. Eric's grin stretched across his face as he carefully collected his old identification cards and a pair of SIM cards from his phones. With deliberate movements, he dropped the items into a small metal bucket, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Producing a lighter, he ignited the contents, watching intently as the plastic warped and melted into a formless, charred mess. Once the last flame flickered out, he reached for a hammer, reducing the phones to a pile of jagged shards. Satisfied with his handiwork, he dumped the remains into a trash can, the act carrying an air of finality. Everything had gone exactly as he'd envisioned. Still smirking, Eric retrieved his car keys and handed them to a young man waiting nearby. "Make sure Bob and Ron know I'm grateful for the loaner," he said in a low voice. The young man's face mirrored Eric's mischievous expression as he replied, "Bob and Ron? Who's that?" "My mistake," Eric replied smoothly, his grin deepening into something playful. Moments later, he was at the airport, weaving through the crowd to check in his luggage. Excitement flickered across his face as his mind danced ahead to the weeks he had carefully mapped out for himself and his son. With his new job not starting until next month, Eric had arranged a much-needed escape. The plan was simple, a secluded, sunlit beach where he and his son could unwind. But it wasn't just about the ocean and sand. Waiting for him there was someone he hadn't seen in years, a striking lieutenant he had befriended during a tour in Afghanistan. Back then, their connection had been purely platonic, but now, armed with undeniable proof of his wife's betrayal, Eric couldn't help but feel a spark of anticipation. The future, he realized, was brimming with possibilities. "Mr. Gray?" called a man behind the counter, his tone polite and professional. "Wishing you and your son a pleasant flight." Eric nodded in acknowledgement, his confidence unshaken. With his son at his side, he walked purposefully through the bustling airport, leaving behind the remnants of his old life. A fresh chapter awaited them, full of promise and uncharted adventures. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. What can I even begin to say? I was utterly blindsided. My wife Maggie managed to drop not one but two bombshells on me in a single evening. The moment I stepped through the door after a long day at work, she greeted me with, "Mac, we need to talk." She was still dressed in her sharp business suit from her accounting job, the picture of composure and professionalism. Meanwhile, I stood there in my chocolate-smeared overalls, remnants of another day spent running my confectionery shop. I'm Angus Mac McDougall, and my wife, full name Margaret Sullivan McDougall, is adamant about keeping her hyphenated last name. I've always thought the hyphenation was a bit much, but it's never been something I've argued over. She goes by Maggie to everyone else. My background is Scottish, hers is Irish, a mismatch that, in hindsight, probably should have hinted at challenges to come. But back then, I didn't care. From the moment I saw her, I was completely captivated. Her radiant blonde hair, striking green eyes, and flawless figure left me spellbound. Our story began 10 years ago, shortly after I left the military. At 22, fresh out of service, I started college. Maggie, 4 years younger, was an ambitious freshman with big dreams ahead of her. I was using the GI Bill to pursue a degree in culinary arts, while she had her sights set on accounting. Despite coming from such different worlds, something just clicked between us. Perhaps it was her insatiable love for chocolate, a passion I was determined to turn into a career, that brought us together. Chocolate had always been a staple in my family. My mom, like so many women, could never resist it. That's why I saw a future in the business. Demand for chocolate never wanes. Holidays like Christmas, Valentine's Day, and Easter keep it thriving year-round. Even unexpected occasions like Independence Day bring in customers. My little shop often sees its highest earnings every February, all thanks to Valentine's Day. By the way, I can't stand my first name, Angus. Seriously, Mom? Out of all the possibilities, you went with that? It's why I've always introduced myself as Mac. Nobody calls me Angus, except my parents, and even then, only when they're mad at me. Not even Maggie uses it. So, there I was, standing in our kitchen after work when Maggie hit me with those ominous words, "We need to talk." Every man knows the dread that phrase carries. It's a universal precursor to bad news, heartbreak, or upheaval. Bracing for impact, I sank into a chair at the table. My gut told me I was about to hear something life-changing. We'd been together for a decade, married for 8 years. As far as I knew, our marriage was solid. I was happy, more than happy, and I thought Maggie felt the same way. Yet, as I tried to make sense of what she could possibly want to discuss, doubt started to creep in. Was it about intimacy? That didn't make sense. Our sex life was vibrant, 4 or 5 times a week, filled with passion and connection. It wasn't just a routine, it was fiery and fulfilling. Money issues? That seemed equally improbable. My business was thriving. After covering salaries, overhead, and taxes, I was pulling in a 6-figure profit. Combined with Maggie's substantial income, our household was bringing in close to $370,000 annually. We were financially stable. Had she stopped loving me? It didn't add up. Just last week, we'd been talking about starting a family. My thoughts spiraled through these scenarios until Maggie interrupted them by sliding a thick envelope across the table. The weight of it felt like a death sentence. "Maggie, please tell me this isn't what I think it is," I said, my voice taut with tension as I studied her face, but her expression betrayed nothing. She'd put on a stoic mask, one that hid any trace of emotion. "I'm sorry, Mac," she said softly, her voice cracking just enough to reveal her inner turmoil. "I should have told you sooner, but I want a divorce." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Why?" I managed to ask, struggling to keep my voice steady even as my world crumbled around me. "It's complicated," she said, her gaze fixed firmly on the table as her voice quivered. "Is there someone else?" I asked, the question heavy with dread, hanging between us like an unspoken truth. I must have been too dazed to feel the fury I knew I should have. When I asked the question, her response was barely audible, her voice barely more than a murmur. "Yes." My tone remained disturbingly even as I followed up. "How long? Why wasn't I raging? I should have been storming through the room, hurling accusations and damning her name. I should have been formulating some bitter revenge against the man who had taken my place in her heart. But all I felt was a cold, empty void. Her answer came swiftly, devoid of shame. 8 months. 8 months. I closed my eyes, letting the enormity of her admission seep into my consciousness. 8 months of deceit, carried out right under my nose. 8 months, I said again, this time aloud. So for 8 months you've been cheating on me, and now, out of the blue, you're telling me you want a divorce. My voice stayed calm, emotionless, as if the weight of the situation couldn't touch me. I guess you'll be taking me to court to clean me out, I added with a detached shrug. California law isn't exactly on the side of someone wronged by infidelity. I don't have much of a leg to stand on. No, Mac, she said quietly, shaking her head as though my assumption disappointed her. That's not what I want. The house is mine. It's been in my family for generations. I'll give you time to sort things out and find another place. Her tone was almost businesslike as she continued. I'll ask for modest alimony, just enough to get by until I remarry. Nothing excessive. I exhaled heavily, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. After a moment of silence, I asked the question lingering on my mind. Do I know him? If you do anything to hurt him, you'll land yourself in prison, she warned, though her caution was unnecessary. The temptation to make him suffer was real, but I wasn't about to throw my life away over vengeance. I understand the stakes, I said. Still, I think I have the right to know who's been cutting me down for the past 8 months. Reginald Pennington, she admitted, lifting her chin as if bracing for my reaction. The name felt like a slap across the face. Reginald. Even before this, I despised the man. Now, my resentment toward him threatened to boil over. I clenched my fists, struggling to control the tide of anger rising within me. Reginald Dolben Pennington. Blonde hair, blue eyes, dripping in old money wealth and the arrogance it breeds. He was a living caricature of privilege, a symbol of everything I hated. The kind of man who could have graced a propaganda poster with his smug self-assurance. And then, there was his barely veiled elitism. I had warned Maggie about him once, long ago, after we all attended a dinner to discuss charity work. She'd waved it off, laughing at my concerns. He's harmless, she'd said. Harmless? Hardly. Reginald Pennington was as harmless as a viper poised to strike. I remembered the night we first encountered him at a community event. Even then, his gaze lingered on Maggie too long, filled with a hunger that made my skin crawl. When he looked at me, his contempt was palpable. My gut had told me to keep him far away from her, but Maggie had brushed aside my instincts as paranoia. Now here we were, and I struggled to keep my fury in check. My voice was controlled, though the words were laced with bitterness. I suppose there's nothing left for me to say or do, I finally managed. Her response was a somber smile, a calculated move meant to soften the blow. But I saw through it. It was a facade, a performance to soothe her conscience. Don't bother, Maggie, I said, my voice calm but firm. It's all pretense. It doesn't matter. If the terms stay as you've outlined, I won't contest the divorce. I'll have my lawyer review everything before I sign. She nodded, unsurprised by my resignation. That's fair, Mac. And for what it's worth, this isn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. Reginald and we connected. I still love you, but I'm in love with him. I'm sorry it had to come to this. Her apology rang hollow. I knew the truth, as clear as day. It wasn't love that drew her to Reginald. It was the allure of the opulent life his fortune could provide. My thoughts drifted back to the charity ball where it all began. He had danced with her that night, his hands straying too close, too familiar. The memory burned in my mind now, seared there like a fresh wound. When they returned to the table, I noticed he had taken a moment to compose himself, straightening his appearance as if it might bolster his confidence. I could see right through it. He didn't have the stamina to truly be what she needed, though I chose to hold my tongue for now. Instead, I murmured a simple, "I'm sorry too," keeping the peace for the moment. The tension lingered as she handed me a thick envelope. "You'll officially be served tomorrow morning, Mac," she stated, her tone cold and detached. "Meet me with my attorney at Tim's office. This is a preview of what I'm seeking in the settlement. She meant Tim Grayson, my oldest friend and trusted lawyer, who had been at my side through every legal hurdle since I started McDougal's chocolate factory. Well, I replied, with a calmness that didn't match the storm inside me. How about we forget about alimony altogether? Reggie's wealthy. You don't really need my money, do you? It was a long shot, but I felt she owed me that much. For a moment she seemed to consider it, her expression softening slightly. But if she agreed, it might derail the plan that was already beginning to form in my head. She shook her head firmly. No, Mac, I need something out of this. I gave you 10 years of my life, after all. Her words landed with the force of a blow. To her, the entirety of our relationship, dating, engagement, marriage, was reduced to wasted time. That harsh truth steeled my resolve. I glanced at the document outlining her alimony demands. She wanted $2,200 a month for 2 years, or until she remarried, whichever came first. It wasn't an insurmountable amount, roughly half of my monthly income after expenses, but it was still significant. Thankfully, my savings could handle it. Feigning deliberation, I finally shrugged. All right, if that's what you want. Then I added, I'm leaving tonight. And I meant it. That evening, I packed a suitcase and a garment bag with clothes, toiletries, and other necessities. I also carefully packed my prized CD collection, everything from Marty Robbins and Metallica to Mozart. My musical tastes were broad, and even Sir Mix-a-Lot found a place in the mix for humor's sake. Once the car was loaded, I left without looking back. About an hour into my drive, I called Kat on her cell. She answered quickly, picking up on the second ring. Hey, Mac, what's going on? I'm out, I said bluntly. Maggie's serving me divorce papers tomorrow at Tim's office. She's trying to play hardball. My voice carried the bitterness I'd been holding in. What? Her disbelief was palpable. Are you serious right now? Completely. For now, I'm staying at the Holiday Inn while I figure things out. The hell you are, she snapped, her tone brooking no argument. Get over here. Now! Her commanding tone made me chuckle despite the mess I was in. Yes, ma'am, I said with a wry smile. Good. I'll see you soon. She hung up abruptly, leaving me shaking my head in rueful amusement. Katrina Monroe, Kat, was my manager at the chocolate factory. She was a striking woman with a magnetic presence that drew everyone's attention. Picture someone like Aisha Tyler, only younger and equally statuesque, standing a towering 180 centimeters tall. Everyone called her Kat, a nickname she embraced. Her boyfriend, Darius Jackson, played for the Los Angeles Dodgers, which I had to admit made him a pretty cool guy in my book. He was on the road for an 8-game business trip and wouldn't return until sometime next week. This left me a brief opportunity to stay at Kat's place, crashing in her guest room until he got back. Darius was usually fine with me hanging around, so I figured there was a chance I could extend my stay. Still, I knew I needed to sort out my living arrangements soon. I could technically afford a modest house outright with the savings I'd carefully set aside. The catch? The divorce settlement, split right down the middle, was still in limbo. That meant buying wasn't an option yet, and I'd likely have to settle for renting an apartment for the time being. These thoughts churned in my mind as I neared Kat's house. Her boyfriend wasn't around much, but was always pushing her to move to Los Angeles and live with him. Kat wasn't ready, though. She wanted the kind of commitment that came with a ring. And there I was, 32, in great shape, financially secure, and yet utterly shattered by the betrayal of the woman I'd married, my soon-to-be ex-wife, a liar and a gold digger. Pulling into Kat's driveway, I parked my beast of a car, Bullet, next to her humble Ford Fusion. The comparison made me smirk. Bullet looked like it could swallow the little Fusion whole. I revved the engine one last time before shutting it off. Popping the trunk, I grabbed my suitcase just as Kat stepped outside. She was wearing tiny Daisy Duke shorts and a fitted tank top, and for a moment her figure, those curves, her long, sculpted legs, knocked the breath out of me. I shoved the thought aside, slammed the trunk shut, and approached her. Without a word, she opened the door, her expression a mix of surprise and something deeper I couldn't quite read. I was in a fog, a haze I'd been living in for weeks. As soon as I stepped inside, though, something in me snapped. I let go of the suitcase, dropped to my knees, and broke down completely. All the emotions I'd been bottling up, the rage, the heartbreak, the sense of failure, came flooding out in waves. I sobbed violently, my body convulsing with raw, unfiltered grief. Tears streamed down my face as Kat knelt beside me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. I clung to her like a lifeline, desperate for something solid to anchor me. "It's okay. You're going to get through this, Mac," she murmured, her voice soft and steady. "No, I'm not," I croaked, shaking my head. And I meant it. I was drowning in my own despair, fully aware of it but powerless to fight back. She tightened her embrace, pressing my head against her chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something close to love, not romantic love, but the deep, unconditional care of a true friend. It was enough to pull me back from the edge. Kat helped me to my feet and led me to the living room. I sank onto her oversized leather couch, utterly spent. "Hey," she said gently, "why don't we watch Darius play? The Dodgers are up against the Braves in Atlanta tonight." She was trying to cheer me up, knowing how much I loved the game. I wiped my face like a child and nodded. "Yeah, okay, that might help," I said, attempting a smile that likely came off more as a grimace. Kat turned on the TV, and the game was already in the fourth inning. The Dodgers were ahead 4-2. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of distraction. Baseball had always been my escape, and tonight was no different. Kat returned with 2 beers, and we settled in to watch. The game was intense, with the lead shifting back and forth before it stretched into extra innings. By the end, we were both on our feet, shouting and laughing as Darius made a jaw-dropping catch to secure the win for the Dodgers. For those few hours, my troubles receded into the background, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a glimmer of my old self again. I was midway through enjoying a sip of the local brew when Kat's laughter cut off abruptly. "You have got to be kidding me! No way!" she blurted, her mouth agape and her gaze fixed on the television like a laser cutting through steel. I turned to see what had captivated her so completely, and my stomach dropped. There was Darius, caught in a passionate, unmistakable kiss with another woman. This wasn't a casual peck. It was the kind of kiss that screamed betrayal. "Is there something wrong with the water around here?" I muttered, my thoughts scrambling to make sense of it all. It felt surreal, as though the universe had decided to stage a simultaneous implosion of Kat's relationship and my own crumbling marriage. "Maybe there's some kind of cheating toxin in it," she snapped, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. I glanced over at her, shaken by the fire blazing in her dark, expressive eyes. "And with a white woman? Are you serious?" she hissed, venom dripping from every word. "The man swore he wasn't even into white women. Lying bastard." For the next 20 minutes, she unleashed her rage, berating Darius with an intensity that filled the room. Eventually, though, her fiery anger gave way to tears. I wrapped an arm around her as she sobbed, her anguish pouring out in waves. When she finally lifted her puffy, tear-streaked face to look at me, a bitter laugh escaped her. "Look at us, 2 idiots, betrayed and broken." A faint, rueful smile tugged at the corners of my lips as I felt tears spill from my own eyes. "At least Maggie had the decency to cheat out of the public eye," I muttered with a shrug. "Well, Darius couldn't even give me that. The coward did it on national television," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Kat. You didn't deserve this," I said, my tone firm and sincere. She pulled me into a tight hug before abruptly grabbing her phone, her expression hardening with determination. "I'm calling him right now," she declared, her voice steady and cold. I nodded silently as she pressed speed dial. "Hey, Darius," she began smoothly, though the icy undertone in her voice betrayed the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Yeah, I watched the game. Mac's here, by the way. His wife's cheating and he's staying with me for now." There was a pause as Darius responded, but Kat's features remained resolute. "Now let's get to the real reason I'm calling," she said sharply. "We saw you with that woman. Care to explain what the hell that was?" Without waiting for his response, she shot me a knowing look and switched the call to speaker. "Baby, you don't understand," Darius said, his tone oozing false charm. "She doesn't mean anything. It's just being on the road. You know, I've got needs. I couldn't help but cringe at his pathetic justification, wondering how someone as smart and fierce as Kat had ever fallen for him. When she finally spoke, her voice was colder than ice. Well, Darius, you can take your needs and shove them. We're done. I'll pack your crap and send it to your place in LA. Don't call, don't text, don't even think about me. Understood? Wait, babe, please, he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. You lost the right to call me babe the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of the whole world, she snapped. We're over, completely, utterly done. Goodbye, Darius. I hope she was worth it. Before he could respond, Kat ended the call with a decisive tap and blocked his number without hesitation. Turning to me, she let out a long sigh, a bittersweet smirk playing on her lips. Well, that's that. No second chances. I nodded, impressed by her resolve. No second chances, I echoed. You're absolutely right. Cheaters don't deserve a do-over. Her expression darkened briefly. What's Maggie planning to do with the divorce? Don't tell me she's trying to leave you high and dry. If she is, I swear I might just step in. I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. Let's take it one disaster at a time, Kat. One disaster at a time. Kat's flair for lacing conversations with euphemisms always entertained me, and I couldn't help but chuckle at her latest turn of phrase. Surprisingly, no, I responded, amusement evident in my tone. She's asking for $2,200 a month in alimony, probably why I'm not inclined to stand in the way of her speeding into a new marriage. But other than that, her terms are shockingly reasonable. I offered a casual shrug. By that point, the tears had stopped, and I was inching toward a state of uneasy acceptance about the divorce. Well, maybe not full acceptance. If I were honest, a part of me still craved revenge. Now that my emotions were steadier, an idea had started to take root in my mind. The finer points would depend on some variables, like which caterer they'd hire for the wedding. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to align. So she must be pretty serious about this guy? Kat asked, her curiosity sharpening. Did she mention who he is? Oh yeah, I said, letting a sly grin spread across my face. And you're going to love this one. Reginald Pennington IV. Kat's eyes nearly popped out of her head. You've got to be kidding me. I'm dead serious, I replied, my laugh dry and humorless. I never had Maggie down as a gold digger, Kat mused, shaking her head in disbelief. Neither did I admitted with a bitter edge. But she's definitely proven me wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if her parents orchestrated this whole thing. They never thought I measured up for their precious daughter. My voice hardened, the bitterness spilling over. To hell with them, I added, unapologetic. Kat reclined in her chair, her gaze narrowing as she studied me. I know that look, Mac. What kind of mischief are you plotting? She had always been able to read me like a book, especially when I was deep in thought. It was a skill honed from years of working together, where she'd seen me crack countless puzzles at the store or factory. Oh, just thinking about something unforgettable, I said, letting a calm smile settle on my lips. Her eyebrow quirked in intrigue. Unforgettable how? Let's just say it'll be a day they'll never forget, I replied cryptically. Kat's giggles escalated into uncontrollable laughter as I laid out the broad strokes of my plan. Mac, you are both terrible and brilliant, she declared, gasping for air between fits of laughter. An evil genius. We'll need to nail down the details, I said, grinning at her reaction. So we stayed up late, sipping beer and ironing out the finer points of our scheme. We estimated the wedding would take place about 3 months after the divorce was finalized, which gave us ample time to get everything in order. The key was maintaining a cordial facade with both Maggie and Reginald to ensure I'd still score an invite. It was well past midnight when I finally hauled my suitcase and overnight bag into Kat's guest room. Before turning in, I let her know I'd be late to the store the next day, since I had a morning meeting with Tim to wrap up the divorce papers. She waved off my concern, offering to handle things at the store or let me take the day off entirely if needed. Despite the late hour, I slept deeply that night. Whether it was the beer or the satisfaction of hatching such a devilishly clever plan, I woke up feeling remarkably refreshed. The enticing aroma of sizzling bacon and scrambled eggs greeted me, luring me out of bed. The familiar scent of brewing coffee added to the inviting scene. It had been years since Maggie had cooked breakfast for me, but here was Kat, effortlessly stepping into the role of the perfect temporary roommate. After a quick shower, I pulled on a t-shirt and jeans, deciding I wasn't ready to dive straight into work after my meeting with Tim. Instead, I wandered into the kitchen, following the tantalizing smells. "Morning, Kat," I greeted, settling onto one of the bar stools in her snug breakfast nook. "Morning, sunshine," she replied with a radiant smile. If nothing else, the day was off to a promising start. "This morning, you look much better than the disheveled state you were in when you arrived last night." "It's all thanks to you, and the beer," I said with a nod of appreciation, my tone laced with humor. Her laughter, bright and infectious, made me chuckle along with her. Kat has a knack for spreading joy like that. She set down a plate of eggs and bacon in front of me. "Here you go, sweetheart." "Are you heading to work after your meeting with Tim?" she asked, placing a steaming mug of coffee beside my plate. "Thanks, Kat. Nah, I'm taking the day off," I answered, taking a sip of the coffee. "I've got to deal with Maggie and her lawyer to finalize the divorce. Not sure how I'll feel afterward." I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "But I'll take you out for lunch later and fill you in." She nodded, her expression a mix of empathy and fiery protectiveness. "You'd better. Honestly, I'm glad I don't have to face that woman. If I did, I might feel like teaching her a thing or two." "That's one of the many reasons I love you, Kat," I said, smirking. "You're the most fiercely loyal person I know." Her smile softened, and a warmth passed between us. "Love you too, boss," she replied as I got up. We shared a close, comforting hug. She's nearly my height, so the embrace felt natural and grounding. "We've both been down this road," I said, holding her a moment longer before stepping back. "Cheated on by our exes. At least they didn't cheat on each other. That would have been too cliché." She let out a laugh, and I couldn't help joining in. "No kidding, but finding out on the same day? That's cosmic-level absurd." Unable to resist, I mimicked her favorite Simpsons character. "Biggest coincidence ever!" She recognized it immediately, laughing as she playfully smacked my shoulder. "You've got a point, Mac. Maybe cheating is just the new pandemic," she joked, raising her eyebrows dramatically. "Oh, here we go with your conspiracy theories again," I teased, rolling my eyes with a grin. "Guilty as charged," she quipped, adding a mock menacing glint to her eyes. After we cleaned up and loaded the dishwasher, she handed me a key. "This was meant for Darius, but I think you'll need it more." "Thanks, Kat." I gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and a hug. "Don't worry. I'll find my own place soon. I won't impose for long." "Take your time, Mac," she insisted. "I'd rather have you here where I can keep an eye on you. After everything you've been through, who knows what kind of mess you'd get yourself into on your own. My dad fell apart when my mom left, and I won't let you go down the same path." "All right, Mom," I joked, earning another light smack on the shoulder and her mischievous grin. I understood where she was coming from. Her parents' divorce hadn't been about cheating, but her mother's struggle with mental health and later alcoholism. Her dad had a rough time coping. Though her situation wasn't as bitter as my betrayal, the pain had left its mark. Kat had vowed early on to be a rock for others, and she carried that strength into everything she did. Our friendship spanned 2 decades. She's 2 years older than me and has always been my defender. Back in school, when I was scrawny and an easy target for bullies, Kat always had my back. She towered over most kids, already built like the powerhouse she'd grow into. No one dared cross her. But her support wasn't limited to protection. She taught me to stand up for myself, even how to fight dirty when necessary, lessons my parents would never have approved of. Kat had learned to fend for herself early on, and she passed that grit to me. By the time we reached our teens, I'd finally shot up a couple of inches taller than her, though the difference was barely noticeable. During my second year of high school, I reached my final growth spurt. By then, Kat had also stopped growing, and those heights became permanent. Over the years, both of us have put on some weight compared to our college days, but we've stayed in decent shape. Kat, a former hurdler on the track team, earned a scholarship to the University of Southern California. I, on the other hand, didn't quite have the skills for a sports scholarship, so I joined the Army and later used the GI Bill to fund my college education. Not long before I married Maggie, I launched a chocolate shop. With her master's degree in business administration, Kat applied for the position of store manager. I hired her immediately. In the first year, I could only offer her a modest salary, but as word spread, the business thrived. Soon, demand surged beyond what we had anticipated. This growth allowed me to hire an excellent team, though Kat remained the standout. After that first year, I trusted Kat to run the store while Maggie and I went on a long overdue honeymoon. For 2 weeks, Kat managed everything flawlessly. By that point, business was booming, we were on track to pay off our bank loan, and I could finally afford raises for the staff. By the end of the 3rd year, the shop had expanded to include a small factory with a cutting-edge kitchen. I secured contracts for premium cocoa beans, enabling us to create exclusive and exotic chocolate blends. In the 5th year, we began offering custom candy orders throughout California. Despite the growth, I remained adamant about not franchising. Around this time, I received a $1 million offer to sell the business. However, my team and I unanimously turned it down. My employees made it clear they wouldn't work for anyone else, and I wasn't willing to lose them. That decision cemented my vision for the business. A close-knit operation with a small team of about 20 employees, focused on quality work and good earnings. This philosophy, however, didn't sit well with Maggie's family. Her father, eager to scale the business, offered to invest. I declined, politely at first, but later more firmly. He argued that expansion was the path to real wealth, but I was already earning more than enough and had no interest in his brand of relentless ambition. This disagreement deepened the rift between us. Maggie's father made his disapproval clear, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Maggie's growing connection with Reginald Pennington, a wealthy heir from her family's social circle, was tied to these tensions. Old money tends to attract its own. After a particularly strained breakfast with her family, Kat and I left, she to the shop and I to meet my lawyer, Tim. When I arrived at Tim's office, Maggie hadn't arrived yet, so we discussed the situation until she showed up. When she finally entered, Tim noticeably tensed. Walking in behind her was none other than Reginald Pennington himself. Seeing his smug expression made my blood simmer, but I kept my composure, ignoring his outstretched hand and focusing on Maggie. "Let's get this done," I said with a shrug. Tim began outlining the division of assets. Since the business had been built without any financial support from Maggie or her family, it was solely mine. The house, gifted to Maggie by her parents after her grandparents passed away, belonged to her. My car, a restoration project I'd worked on since middle school, was indisputably mine. Then Tim delivered an unexpected twist. "So, are you divorcing my client to marry Reginald Pennington IV?" he asked Maggie directly. The question caught her off guard. She faltered, initially dodging the question, but Tim pressed her. "A simple yes or no will suffice," he said firmly. Her lawyer, who seemed like a knockoff Gloria Allred, leaned over to whisper in her ear. Finally, Maggie murmured, "Yes," avoiding eye contact. Tim seized the moment, asking how soon she intended to marry Reginald. This sparked a flurry of hushed but heated whispers between Maggie, Reginald, and her lawyer. Meanwhile, Tim leaned over to me and whispered one word: alimony. I couldn't help but grin. He was determined to ensure that I wouldn't owe her a dime. When the trio broke their embrace, Maggie turned to Tim once more. "Once the divorce is finalized, we've basically finished organizing the wedding," she remarked with a sense of satisfaction. Tim nodded in response, shifting his focus to a detailed financial report about Reggie, the kid. "If these numbers are accurate," he began, pausing as he scanned the document, "Mr. Pennington, putting aside his collection of homes and cars, is worth nearly $1 billion. Tim's tone sharpened as he addressed Maggie directly. "Mrs. McDougal, why would you seek alimony from your honest, hard-working husband when you could simply ask Mr. Pennington for anything you want?" Maggie, as if on cue, was pulled into another round of bickering with Gloria Jr. and El Culo. Tim glanced at me with a knowing smirk, and I returned it while the trio huddled to hash out their next steps. Gloria Jr. eventually emerged from the group, her eyes locking onto mine with a no-nonsense intensity. "What do you consider fair?" she asked bluntly. She can have all the furniture, I replied casually, giving a nonchalant shrug. I couldn't care less about it. The trio reconvened, their voices hushed in serious deliberation. At last, they turned back to Tim. Gloria Jr. spoke with finality. We agree. That was it. No child support for me, and I wouldn't take a single piece of furniture. Gloria Jr. promptly updated the divorce paperwork and we signed it, all except for Reggie, the kid. The documents were filed that very day, coinciding with the departure of Gloria's feminist lawyer associate. As I headed to my car, Maggie and Reggie approached. Angus, old chap, I hope there are no hard feelings, Reggie began, extending his hand for a handshake. That was all the provocation I needed. Gripping his hand tightly, I squeezed until his face contorted in agony. Call me Angus again, Reginald, and you'll regret it. It's Mr. McDougal to you, got it? Reggie dropped to his knees, grimacing as the grinding of his hand bones became audible. Yes, Mr. McDougal, please let go, he stammered, panic in his voice. I released him before causing any real damage, and he exhaled in visible relief. That's for calling me Angus, I said evenly. As for Maggie, no hard feelings. With that, I turned and walked back to my car. Strangely, I felt great. I wasn't paying alimony, and the divorce was almost behind me. Then a thought struck me. Spinning back around, I approached Maggie, who was helping Reggie to his feet. Maggie, I said firmly, before I go, I need my grandmother's wedding ring back. I extended my hand expectantly. Maggie stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language, but finally complied, removing her wedding bands and handing them over. Thanks, I said with a curt nod, pocketing the rings before heading back to my car. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the throaty V8 engine, shifted into gear, and stomped on the accelerator. The tires screeched as I sped out of the parking lot, leaving behind a plume of smoke and the stench of burned rubber. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw Reggie standing there, cradling his hand in stunned disbelief. Smirking to myself, I drove off toward the store. When I arrived, Kat and the rest of the team greeted me warmly. There were handshakes, hugs, and condolences all around. I expressed my gratitude, assuring them I was fine. Now let's get back to work, I said with a smile, making it clear I was ready to move on. The truth? I felt amazing. With the legal fees evenly split and the furniture left behind, none of which I cared for, I had walked away from a messy marriage with barely a scratch. Kat, let's go grab some lunch, I suggested. I drove us to a nearby restaurant in my car, affectionately named The Bullet. Kat was thrilled, marveling at the car's deep growl and the sheer power radiating from it like an unstoppable force. We sat down to share a meal, the room filled with the kind of laughter that only comes from years of friendship. Two people bound by time and complicated emotions, deepening a connection forged through shared experiences. Still, the sting of betrayal lingered, and I couldn't help but marvel at my own blindness, how completely Maggie's actions had escaped my notice. Finally, I broke the silence, frustration sharpening my tone. How did I miss it? How could I have been so blind? Kat met my gaze with her usual calm, her voice steady and reassuring. You weren't blind, Mac. You were in love. Love has a way of clouding the obvious. Her smile was soft, and she reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. Her gesture brought an unexpected but genuine smile to my face. Thanks, Kat. I gave her hand a squeeze, silently acknowledging how much her support meant to me. She wasn't just my colleague or friend. She was a pillar in my life, someone who had always been there when I needed her most. Our bond went back to childhood, to the days when she stood up for me as the smallest kid in school. Years later, when I started my business, hiring her as my office manager had been an easy choice. She was the sharpest, most reliable person I knew, and time had only proven how indispensable she was. You don't need to thank me, she said, her lips curving into a teasing grin. Just make sure my bonus doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Her humor pulled a genuine laugh from me. It's already done. I looked into her deep brown eyes, and for a fleeting moment, our gazes locked. When she finally looked away, I noticed the faintest blush on her caramel skin. I pushed the thought aside. Kat was my friend, nothing more, and yet I couldn't deny the warmth her presence brought. In all the years I'd known her, I had never let myself think of her in any way but as a friend. Of course, I wasn't blind to her beauty. How could I be? Just last night, when I'd picked her up from her house, the way she carried herself had been impossible to ignore. But that reaction was normal, wasn't it? Just a natural response to a striking woman. Still, I wasn't ready to explore those thoughts. Not now. I shifted the conversation, steering us towards safer, lighter topics. After lunch, I dropped her off at the store and headed out on my own, needing time to clear my head. I drove to the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, where the crashing waves could drown out my thoughts. Standing at the edge, I took off the wedding ring I had worn for 8 long years. From my pocket, I retrieved Maggie's engagement ring and held both in my hand. The sunlight reflected off their surfaces, stirring a deep ache in my chest. Then I pulled out my grandmother's wedding ring, the one she had left me. After a moment of reflection, I slipped her ring back into my pocket and hurled the other 2 into the ocean. I watched as the rings caught the light one last time before vanishing into the waves below. It felt like a ritual, a symbolic end to a marriage that had already crumbled. The divorce was a foregone conclusion, but this was closure, a moment to let go. Forgiveness, however, was a different story. Neither Maggie nor her lover Reggie would walk away unscathed. A line from a song echoed in my mind, "Payback's a bitch, and I pay for everything." The memory of pounding drums and electric guitar riffs fueled my determination. Maggie would face the consequences of her betrayal, and Reggie wouldn't escape my wrath either. Call it revenge or justice, I didn't care what anyone thought. Let them try living my life before passing judgment. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Our assets were split evenly, and life settled into an uneasy new normal. Kat and I continued living together, our friendship growing stronger as we navigated the transition. At work, no one questioned our arrangement. We were just Mac and Kat, the same reliable team we had always been. Then one evening, an envelope arrived in the mail, a wedding invitation. Maggie and Reggie weren't wasting time. They had set a date just a month after our divorce was finalized. As I read the invitation, I felt Kat's eyes on me. She offered me a faint smile, one that I couldn't help but return. The storm was coming, and we both knew it. "It's time to focus," I muttered under my breath, gripping the steering wheel with a mix of frustration and determination as we drove to Costco. Sorting out the wedding caterer should have been straightforward. There was a guy I'd nearly worked with months ago, but our plans had fallen apart back then. This time I resolved to take matters into my own hands and give him another opportunity. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Maggie would be glowing in white naturally, just like Reggie, the so-called kid, who'd strut in a navy blue suit, pretending he was some wartime naval aviator. In reality, he was playing dress-up. While I'd served under Captain Drake and Alpha Team, Reggie couldn't even pull off a classic black tux. A few days before the wedding, I dropped by the caterer and discreetly swapped out their chocolate cake mix for my own customized version. The grin that spread across my face felt almost devilish. My little adjustment wasn't lethal, but it would make sure this wedding would be remembered, for all the wrong reasons. Call it immature, call it petty. After 8 months of manipulation capped by the sting of divorce papers, I needed some payback. Sure, Maggie had been cordial through the legal process, but no amount of politeness could mend the wreckage she'd left in her wake. This wasn't just about a cake. It was about setting things right. When I told Kat about my plan, her laughter gave me all the encouragement I needed. "Operation Mudslide is officially on," I announced. While the wedding invitations promised a joyous reception, I knew the truth. The real entertainment was yet to come. The morning of the wedding arrived, and Kat and I prepared for the big day. To clarify, we weren't sharing a shower, just the bathroom. Over the past few months, we'd grown closer, though there was still a careful distance between us, as if both of us feared that crossing the line might ruin what we had. At least her shiny new tankless water heaters made the morning routine smoother. Once I'd donned my crisp Armani suit, I waited in the living room, lazily watching UCLA's soccer game until Kat finally appeared. "How do I look?" she asked casually. My mouth practically hit the floor. Words abandoned me as I stared at her. She stood there in an emerald green dress that fit her like a dream, emphasizing every contour with elegant precision. The fabric shimmered under the light, exuding confidence and undeniable allure. Her shoulder-length hair framed her face in soft waves, and her ruby-red lips curved into a smile that demanded attention. A subtle touch of green eyeshadow highlighted her gaze, tying the look together flawlessly. Low heels brought her up to my height, accentuating her toned calves, and the plunging neckline paired with an open back revealed just enough to be utterly captivating. "Wow, you look incredible," I managed at last, still awestruck. Her smile widened. "Thanks, Mac. You're looking pretty dashing yourself." Heat rose to my cheeks as I murmured my thanks, and we headed out. During the drive to the church, Billy Idol's White Wedding came on the radio, filling the car with a deliciously ironic soundtrack. When we arrived, the throaty growl of my V8 engine caught everyone's attention, making our entrance impossible to ignore. Inside, the atmosphere practically oozed old money. The guests were dressed to the nines, draped in pearls and exuding an air of superiority. I glanced at Kat. "This might be better than I imagined," I whispered. She responded with a sly grin. We handed over our invitations to a man stationed at the entrance, security in the most charitable sense. He looked like one of Reggie's leftover henchmen, a relic from the ostentatious events Reggie used to throw. Apparently, the Pennington family had made enough enemies in their ruthless climb to the top to justify extra muscle. That didn't surprise me. Their motto seemed to be, "Destroy others before they destroy you." As Kat and I found seats in the pews, the haughty stares from the elite crowd only fueled my anticipation. None of these people had the slightest clue about what was in store. Leaning toward Kat, I whispered, "Whatever happens, steer clear of the chocolate at the reception." She bit her lip to suppress a laugh and brushed a quick kiss against my cheek. The stage was set. Let the chaos begin. The ceremony dragged on endlessly, a monotonous marathon that seemed to epitomize the grandeur of a traditional Catholic wedding. Staying alert became a test of endurance, though I somehow managed to persevere. Reggie, I had to admit, cut a dashing figure in his Navy uniform, a fact that only deepened my disdain for the man. Before joining the family business, Reggie had been a naval officer, his polished Annapolis class ring gleaming proudly as he awaited Maggie's entrance. Then came the familiar strains of the wedding march, and there she was, walking arm in arm with her self-satisfied father. As I watched them, memories of my own wedding resurfaced. Back then, that man's expression had been a scowl aimed squarely at me. Now his face radiated joy, thrilled that his daughter was marrying a man he deemed acceptable. It took every ounce of restraint not to knock the smug look off his face. But patience, I reminded myself, everything in its time. The ceremony unfolded with predictable pomp, and I'll spare you the details. Vows Maggie had once dismissed, rings she had rendered meaningless, and the standard litany of matrimonial rituals. None of it mattered. What truly counted was the role I played afterward, a flawless portrayal of composure and goodwill. At the reception, I delivered my congratulations with such authenticity that even I might have believed it. Kat, ever my loyal partner in crime, played her part impeccably. Maggie's betrayal had wounded not just me, but everyone who cared about her, Kat included. Yet her simmering anger lent her the perfect icy resolve for the occasion. Reggie naturally couldn't resist gloating. "Angus, old friend," he began with infuriating smugness, "hope there are no hard feelings. The better man won after all." His self-satisfied grin all but begged for a punch. Instead, I met his arrogance with an equal measure of my own. "You're absolutely right," I replied smoothly. "The better man did win." Then, in one bold move, I pulled Kat into an unexpected, fiery kiss. She froze momentarily, startled, but quickly gave in, her arms wrapping around my neck as her fingers tangled in my hair. For a moment, the world around us seemed to vanish. When we broke apart, we turned to see Reggie and Maggie staring, their expressions a mix of shock and indignation. Kat, ever the queen of theatrics, winked at them before gracefully walking away, leaving the pair speechless. Triumphant, we shared a conspiratorial smile and settled in for dinner, a surprisingly good lobster dish. But the evening's highlight awaited, the towering wedding cake. Reggie and Maggie sliced into it with exaggerated ceremony, their forced smiles plastered on as the crowd laughed and cheered. And then, the chaos began. It started innocently enough with the bride, her flatulence ringing out audibly, silencing the room. Before anyone could react, Reggie followed with an even louder one. The sheer absurdity was almost too much to process. I couldn't resist muttering, "You two stink," earning chuckles from those nearby. But what started as humor quickly spiraled into horror. Maggie's face twisted in alarm, a strange gurgling sound escaping her. Reggie, too, looked stricken, the unmistakable stench confirming the worst. As the first wave of guests began succumbing to the same humiliating fate, panic erupted. Maggie and Reggie fled toward the restrooms, leaving a mortifying trail in their wake. The scene was a slow-motion disaster, as more and more guests succumbed to the gastrointestinal calamity. Meanwhile, Kat and I made our discreet exit, collapsing into the car in fits of uncontrollable laughter. Tears streamed down our faces as we gasped for air, struggling to speak between hysterical bouts. "Oh my God, Mac," Kat managed, clutching her sides. "That was unbelievable." Still laughing, I asked, "Think I overdid it?" Her laughter renewed. "How much did you even use?" Wiping my eyes, I confessed, "A Costco-sized stash." "How many boxes?" she asked, breathless. "Enough," I replied with a grin. And so, as the night descended into chaos for everyone else, we drove off, basking in the perfect ending to an otherwise disastrous day. She gawked at me, a mix of astonishment and disbelief etched across her face. "Wait, you're not joking? You actually swapped out all the cake mix?" she asked, her tone straddling shock and the beginnings of a laugh. I kept my expression steady, exuding calm confidence, while Kat practically folded over, unable to contain her mirth at the sheer boldness of it. "Every single box," I confirmed, my own smirk barely restrained. The Pennington wedding caterer's entire cake mix stash? Gone. I had replaced nearly all of it with powdered chocolate laxatives. The cakes and cupcakes were now loaded with it, though I left a small amount of cake mix blended in to avoid suspicion. Honestly, I hadn't anticipated just how potent or swift the results would be, but that only made the plan even sweeter. Later that evening, I dropped by the catering company under the guise of discussing a potential business collaboration. Months earlier, the head caterer had contacted me about sourcing chocolate from my factory. Back then, I'd brushed him off, citing logistical delays, but now I conveniently had samples ready to share. His excitement was almost comical. He was eager to finalize a deal and secure my supply. During the tour, he proudly showcased their bustling kitchen and casually mentioned the Pennington wedding preparations. I already knew all about it, of course. The bride was my ex-wife, a manipulative opportunist who'd cheated her way into this new marriage. She deserved every bit of what was coming. I played my part flawlessly, maintaining an air of professionalism and charm. After dismissing his staff for the day, the caterer shook my hand, promising to send over a draft contract soon. Let's just say the events that followed overshadowed that promise entirely. Once the coast was clear, I slipped into my car and circled to the building's rear entrance. The kitchen door, slightly ajar, was an open invitation. Moving with practiced efficiency, I swapped out their cake mix for the laxative powder. My old service mentor, Captain Drake, always stressed the importance of leaving no evidence. I took his lesson to heart, making sure the kitchen was locked up tight before I left. Drake, by the way, now teaches history at UCLA, a truly honorable man. By the time the wedding day rolled around, there was no trace of my handiwork. The chaos that ensued, completely disconnected from me. Only Kat and I knew the truth, and she wasn't about to let the secret slip. That night, back at my apartment, Kat turned to me with an unexpectedly serious expression. "Mac," she began, her voice wavering slightly, "about what happened earlier. The kiss." I felt heat rise to my face. "Kat," I cut in, flustered. "I know I shouldn't have kissed you. It was impulsive. You're just so stunning and I couldn't help myself." She gently pressed a finger to my lips, silencing me. "Let me finish," she said softly. "That kiss, it was the most incredible kiss I've ever had." A faint blush crept onto her cheeks as she continued. "Mac, you're not just a good man. You're an amazing one. I think we'd be incredible together." Her words left me speechless. Slowly I leaned in, and our lips met again, this time slower, filled with an emotion that had been dormant for too long. As we pulled back, our eyes locked, and in that moment I knew. "I think you're right," I murmured. "Let's see where this goes." Her smile was radiant as she followed me inside. We kissed again, the passion between us deepening. Her dress slipped from her shoulders as I kissed the soft curve of her skin. In no time our clothes were cast aside, and her touch sent a current of electricity through me. When our bodies came together, it was an unspoken affirmation of something neither of us had dared to hope for. Afterward, she traced her fingers along my jawline and gave me a playful, satisfied smile. "Mac, your ex must have been insane to let you go." I laughed, the sound light and free. "You didn't notice the dollar signs in her eyes when she said I do?" Kat grinned, her laughter filling the room. "Oh, I noticed. But seriously, the fallout from today? Mr. and Mrs. Brownpants? They might want to rethink their last name." We both dissolved into uncontrollable laughter, the kind that leaves your sides aching. When the humor finally subsided, I pulled her close once more. This time there was no rush, no lingering thoughts of revenge or regret. It was about the quiet intimacy we shared, the joy of discovering something real. For the first time in years, I felt truly content. Kat had never truly known the feeling of being adored. She later shared with me how the men in her past relationships had been entirely self-centered, disregarding her desires and needs. Determined to change that, I made it my goal to show her what genuine care felt like, and I succeeded. We spent an entire day and night lost in each other's company, relishing every moment of intimacy. At one point, we took a shower together, only to find ourselves drawn back into bed, wrapped in the warmth of our connection. Some might question the way I handled the caterer issue, but the problem started with Sal, the owner of the catering company. From the moment Kat met him to discuss a potential business arrangement, his behavior crossed numerous boundaries, making her uncomfortable. She made it clear we wouldn't work with him. The situation escalated when his company was announced as the caterer for the Pennington wedding, and it presented an ideal opportunity to deal with two issues at once. What followed became known in the media as the infamous wedding fiasco, and the aftermath was nothing short of dramatic. By the next morning, the story had gone viral. Social media and news outlets were filled with videos of the high society guests fleeing the reception hall in complete disarray, rushing toward the restrooms. I invited our co-workers to Kat's place for a viewing party, and we laughed uncontrollably as we watched the chaos unfold. Though the footage didn't expose our involvement, everyone in our circle knew we were behind it. Watching those arrogant elites scramble was more satisfying than we'd ever imagined, and we laughed until tears streamed down our faces. The only ones I felt bad for were the cleaning staff tasked with handling the aftermath. Naturally, detectives came knocking a week later to ask questions. Kat and I stuck to our story, claiming we'd left early due to an approaching storm. We stayed composed during the interviews and only let our laughter loose after the investigators left. That was the last we heard about the incident. In the meantime, Reginald Reggie Pennington IV filed a lawsuit against Sal's catering business for damages. Sal, however, vanished before any legal action could reach him. Rumor had it he'd fled to Italy, his home country, but no one knew for sure what became of him. As for Reggie, less than a year into his marriage, he was caught in bed with another man's wife. The husband, in a fit of rage, confronted Reggie, and the encounter ended with Reggie losing a testicle. Maggie, Reggie's wife, was called to the scene and wasted no time berating him before walking out for good. Ironically, Maggie had been unfaithful throughout their marriage but couldn't tolerate being on the receiving end of betrayal, a blatant hypocrisy. By then, Kat and I had upgraded from her modest one-bedroom apartment to a spacious four-bedroom ranch-style house. Within a year, I had paid off half the mortgage, and we were settling comfortably into our new life. We later discovered that Reggie had forced Maggie to sign a prenuptial agreement. If she initiated a divorce, she'd walk away with nothing but her personal belongings. While she still had her $125,000 a year job, the luxurious life she dreamed of was no longer within reach. Maggie Sullivan wasn't getting any billion-dollar payout. One evening, about a year later, an unexpected knock came at our door. Kat, now 4 months pregnant, was resting, so I kissed her and went to answer it. Standing on the doorstep was Maggie, tears streaming down her face. "What do you want, Maggie?" I asked, keeping my voice steady and indifferent. She sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Mac. For everything." I shrugged. "You made your choices. What happened?" Her tears came harder. "I caught Reginald cheating on me." "That's ironic," I replied with a dry laugh, my sarcasm unmistakable. "Mac, I really am sorry," she continued, her voice faltering. "I was wondering if—" Her words trailed off as Kat appeared behind me, her growing belly impossible to miss. "Who's at the door, baby?" she asked with a soft smile, her tone curious. "It's Maggie," I answered, turning to Kat, "and she was just leaving." Without waiting for a reply, I closed the door in Maggie's face, locked it, and wrapped Kat in a warm embrace. "She's part of the past," I murmured. "You're my future. I love you." "I love you too," Kat said, her voice full of affection as she kissed me. Not long after, Kat and I married in a small, intimate civil ceremony, exactly as she'd wanted. She's not only my wife, but my manager at work and my closest confidant. To this day, my love for her has only grown, deeper than I ever thought possible. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.